No matter how much downward pressure Trump is putting on rates, they are still sitting right now at near 6%.
He's going to get his way. He's going to push these down. There's trillions of dollars sitting in this 2 to 4% range, right? I'll call it 2.5, let's say. There's trillions, right? So he's got a ways to go. He's got almost 2 points. And for those of you who know, rates were at like 3.1 in January of 2022. And they doubled in 9 months, okay? So we are about where we were at the end of 2022. So rates have come back. They've come back to earth a little bit in the last year. Obviously, we got some rate cuts now on the Fed side. But to your point, they're still in the sixes. And so there's all this unlocked, tapped equity that will really, really be good for the economy.
Yeah, and you have to remember that this is the lowest rates have been in about 3 years. So they are trending downwards. They're just not, people got so used to rates moving so quickly because they move so quickly down and then they move so quickly up. But now, this slow, gradual move to the bottom is more normal.
Now let's look at a couple softballs that could really, I guess, throw a wrench into all this. The first one, of course, is inflation. Okay, because when inflation went up to 9.1% in June of 2022, the Fed responded by raising their rates from 3.1 and up, and they basically doubled in 9 months to compensate for high inflation. So right now we got inflation just a little bit under 3%. The Fed's target is 2, so they're not quite at their target. But if we do see inflation, that could flatline interest rates through this year.
Yeah, what you're essentially saying is that if we see inflation go up, then that is going to be a problem for them.
It'll be a problem. It means that the 6% mortgage rates might not change much. In fact, they could even go up, right? Like just like they did. Now they probably won't because again, they were at 3.1 in January of 2022, right? And then they more than doubled. And that's, so we're not that far off of where we were 3 years ago. We're at a 3-year low, of course, and that's good. But the reality is higher inflation could throw a wrench in this whole thing, right? And then you got unemployment, which is a whole nother thing.
But also, you bring up unemployment, but the unemployment is downward pressure on inflation because if people aren't spending money, then things go down in price and things, you have a lower inflation bar. So this unemployment continuing to go up is really setting us up for lower inflation. And also, the Fed has to decide between focusing on unemployment or focusing on inflation as far as rates go. And historically, they have focused on unemployment because they don't want any kind of big recession.
Yeah, and if you measure, where jobs are, there's 1 million more jobs today than there were 1 year ago available, right? That's year over year. So that's going the wrong direction as well. And, you can blame AI, and I'm sure that's a big piece of it. But it can also be inflationary where a lot of the employees or employers, they're trying to figure out, just like you are, like look at yourself, look at an HOA. They're easy to take shots at. Why are your HOA fees going up? Because costs are up. Costs are up for employers too. Employers are trying to figure out ways to cut back. And so, higher costs do ripple. This is the lag effect. And if costs are up, then what happens? Employers say, let's see if we can add more work to existing staff or whatever. But they're cutting back right now to try to become profitable.
Yeah, and you have to remember, too, there's weaker consumer spending in general, right? And weaker consumer spending leads to lower amounts of inflation. Part of the reason, or most of the reason, we had such massive inflation in 2020 was people were getting stimulus checks and they were spending them. That was like one of the main reasons, that we had the inflation in the first place.
Yeah, so what was interesting, if you looked at personal savings rates during that time, like just Google that, like on Fed, the St. Louis Fed, just Google personal savings rate, and you'll see it spiked. When everybody got all that money, it went way up.
Yeah.
And then what happened after that? It went way down. They spent it.
Yeah.
And then what they do, they start getting in debt. And as you know, the credit card debt just is rocketing up. It's ridiculous. Like, it looks like a hockey stick.
Yeah.
It's bad. I mean, people are getting more and more in debt. So what's happening is they haven't really had any behavioral change.
Well, but they're the things that they're spending money on, groceries, rent.
Starting to now.
Yeah.
Yes,
they can't afford it.
And you're seeing it in like malls, like these retailers, they're people are shopping online too. Yes, I get that. But yeah, some of these big retailers, these big brands are in trouble, right? People aren't, the discretionary money it's not flowing around like it was.
Yep. And then the other thing that you have is that Trump just appointed a new chair to the Federal Reserve, Warsh. And he, he's more conservative, but let's be honest, Trump is going to appoint who he has discussed cutting rates with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, we knew this was coming, right? He just was throwing Powell under the bus as much as he could. No, those two, which is interesting because he appointed them.
Right. Well, I was going to say the same thing could happen with Warsh, right?
Oh,
because
trust me.
One thing Trump hates is he can't fire these people after he appoints them. So
all he can do is badmouth them in the press, right?
Yeah.
Which is why his ratings are low. He wants rates low. And if the guy doesn't deliver, you watch, the gloves are going to come off, and it's going to be very interesting to see the battle between these egos.
So we also have to look at the Treasury and bond market because those really do also drive interest rates. Now, I know everybody thinks that the rates are completely detached from the Fed and they're completely dependent on the bond market. But the truth is last year, every time the Fed lowered rates, lending rates went down. So, yes, they're tied to both, let's say. But the bond market is important because even if the Fed lowers rates, the bond market has to cooperate.
That's right. Yeah. And again, the Fed, they have a dual mandate. Of course, we've already talked about this, but one is inflation and two is unemployment, right? So that's what they use typically. And don't forget, there's, 13 governors, I think, that are underneath the Fed, and they all vote. And so there's some really, really cool things that you can look at. Number one is there are notes that each Federal Reserve Bank has. And I've read these, and they're fascinating, actually. They focus on their geographical area. And this is why I think I don't think there's corruption inside of the Fed personally. I think what happens is you have each person comes there and they're looking at their geographical area, and there's these Fed notes. They're very, very, very cool.